What's up, everybody? Anthony Gazenza here with the Orange Black Insider Bengals podcast. Hope you are doing well. We've got a little later start than usual. It's my fault again. I know. I'm that guy. I am that guy, John Sheeran. Always running late, always making you wait on me. Not fair to you. I apologize, but we're here. We're going to talk some Bengals football. We're going to talk training camp. We're going to talk all kinds of different things. How are you, my friend? How are you?
Look, man, you're the adult here. You have the actual responsibilities. So, it just comes to the territory. I'm just lucky I don't have to deal with that stuff,
Responsibility sucks. But that's all right. Anyway, we will move on and talk. We've got a lot to get to tonight. We're going to talk some training camp stuff, some headlines, and all kinds of different things we're going to talk about there. We're going to talk about we've got some fun things to talk about in the State Your Case. We'll do that. We've got some other first place non-divisional teams we've talked about. We've gone by divisions, breaking down the Bengals schedules and their opponents within each division. And then, of course, there are three others that we don't necessarily see them play all that often. We saw them play a couple of those teams twice last year, but not some others that they don't see regularly on their schedule. We'll talk about those and kind of preview those teams. And of course, we have a remember when before we get on out of here. Before we get to all of that, I want to remind folks about something. We last week had the pleasure of having Mr. David Pollack, former Cincinnati Bengal linebacker, former Georgia Bulldog, and current ESPN analyst, college football analyst, on the show. Gave us about 35 minutes, which was awesome. He was only supposed to give us like 20. And John, I don't know about you, man. I thought that was a really fun conversation. Obviously very personable and great dude.
Phenomenal storyteller too. It's no surprise that he's succeeded the way he has on television and everything that has come with kind of being like a television journalist, even though he said that it took him a decent amount of time to eventually get to that point. But from linebacker to survivor of his horrific injury to be able to just do what he now loves with College Game Day. Phenomenal human being and a phenomenal foundation that he and his family are running, the Pollack Family Foundation. We are running a fundraiser to, help them out with all that they do. So if you guys can support his foundation by donating super chats or donating to the link that we will have, I believe within the video, we would greatly appreciate it. We're going to try to keep it going throughout the next couple of weeks just to keep the fundraiser alive, but definitely check out that interview from last week. I believe Anthony posted a separate video on the YouTube channel with just the interview, so definitely check it out. It's definitely worth your time.
It was a lot of fun, and definitely not because of me, but it was a lot of fun because of our guest. And as John said, the Pollack Family Foundation does a lot of different things. It's got its arms and hands in a lot of different awesome causes. They've help out the Children's Hospital of Atlanta. They help out at-risk mothers, at-risk youth, with a lot of different things. With, I think it's Hope 139 is the foundation that they work with there. And then, of course, they do a lot of different things promoting wellness, nutrition, and everything within the family dynamic as well to help stop childhood obesity. And look, here's the deal. You see the website, givesendgo.com / Pollack Family Foundation. I think there's a typo, so we'll write that again there in the live chats, but givesendgo.com / Pollack Family Foundation. Here's the deal. You can see here, we've raised some money. We haven't put in the super chats that we got yet last week, but we're way off on what they have a lofty goal. There's no doubt about it, but we are way off, and we are committing to helping out as much as possible. You guys were awesome last year, and in other various endeavors, Javante Ward's Foundation and whatnot. You guys were awesome, bringing us donations and all kinds of different things. And we're just highlighting this charity. They want to do all of the things that they have been doing, plus put on an awesome Christmas concert. We want to support them. We want to support David Pollack and everything that they do at the Pollack Family Foundation. So please, I don't like to hit up people for money for anything. This is not stuff for John and I. This is all stuff for charity. So if you have, just think, if you listen to our show, if you've ever listened to our show once, if everybody did donated $1, think about the impact that would have and the money that would raise. Not that we have this big listenership, but I'm just saying, if you subscribe to our channel, if you give a thumbs up to Cincy Jungle's Facebook page or something, if you just donated $1 to this thing, we can make a huge impact. So please do. We've got prizes, and we'll start announcing what specifically those are. I've got a couple in hand, John, that I think people will really want to. So maybe we got to start teasing some people, give them some dangle that carrot, so to speak, out in front of them to get them going. But please, I wanted to start the show off with just a reminder that we've got this going, and we want folks to please help us out how they can.
Absolutely, man. And I just remember all that you guys did last year when we had Ken Anderson on, we had Anthony Munoz on, highlighting the Ring of Honor and their foundations. And I remember the emails that I got because my email was attached to the GoFundMe, and like there was a personal email that was sent from the Ken Riley Foundation saying that thank you so much for this great donation, and I obviously attributed to all you guys. That if it wasn't for you guys, that we wouldn't have been able to do that. We wouldn't have been able to make an impact for that great foundation, and we wouldn't be highlighting the Pollack Family Foundation if they weren't a organization worth highlighting and helping out. So definitely help out if you can.
Please do. All right. That being said, John, training camp is upon us. The Bengals we had our first padded practice, Tuesday, right? And, they've been doing some other drills and whatnot. Joe Burrow, obviously, slowly coming back from the appendectomy, and he's been cited on the field and in the golf cart and all kinds of different things. And then, of course, we've got other happenings and winners, losers, all of that. Where do we want to start?
Yeah, so let's start with Burrow, I guess, because he was out on the golf cart, or I guess like the maintenance cart. That's not an actual golf cart. That's not the one where you put the bags on. That's the one where like the greenskeepers they use. But it's whatever Mike Brown has used for the past 30 years. He has some experience with that. And I saw him yesterday when I was down at practice live, but he was not out on Tuesday. And I think because, for one, he just needs rest. So there's no need to have him out into the sun and walking around or just getting in and out of the cart or whatever. I also don't think that Burrow, like, he's a pretty genuine person overall, but I don't think he loves to show any sign of weakness. And right now, it's just post-surgery soreness, and he still has that patch on his left arm where like the catheter was for what the surgical process was. So it's still pretty early days in the recovery process for that. He wasn't going to be practicing a week after the procedure was performed, but at this point, things should be looking a little bit better for him. This is now entering the later part of the second week of the post-surgery process. So maybe by the end of next week, right before the first preseason game, we may have signs of him coming back, or maybe him actually practicing for the first time, but I don't think they're willing to rush him at all. And at this point, there's no way that he's going to play in that first preseason game, and he really doesn't have to at this point.
Do you foresee him playing much at all this preseason? I don't see much really between the appendectomy, between just the risk associated with playing in some of those games. I don't really see it, him getting significant snaps, but maybe you disagree.
No, I mean, I still don't quite remember. I have to look back at this last year because it was the first year where they only had 3 preseason games. And I can't remember if it was the second or the third game where they left the starters in for the most time, because normally it's that third preseason game, and that's against the Rams, and they have practices leading up to that game against the Rams. So if Burrow does play any sort of significant time in the preseason, it's probably going to be that third game. But yeah, I don't think it's truly necessary for him to play more than just a drive if that's the case. And by the time that third preseason game comes around, he probably would have had at least, at the bare minimum, a week of full practice under his belt. And they do get the benefit of having 9 days between the first preseason game and the second preseason game. The first is the 12th and the second is the 21st. So maybe when he's ramping up like the practice or the participation leading up to that second preseason game, they still kind of hold him out, or maybe they have him in for a drive. That would be like the most that I could foresee. But I think by the time the third preseason game comes around, he'll probably play a drive at that point.
Could be. Again, it's just like, man, can we just have a normal Joe Burrow training camp off season without any stuff? But apparently not. We'll get through it. He'll get through it. He's already out there rubbing elbows, so to speak, with his teammates and keeping an eye on things. So Joe Burrow is back out there in some capacity. We'll just have to see what what that means in terms of practice time, playing, all of that. But no Joe Burrow. We talked a lot about there being no Jesse Bates. Do we want to go winners and losers, or I mean, I don't know if you go winners and losers, or maybe just people who have been impressing at this point in time. I mean, I think, and I saw another clip from Dave Lapham talk about this, but Kwame Lassiter seems to be a guy that does turn in a lot of heads. And every year, John, there seems to be that undrafted free agent wide receiver, some guy coming out of nowhere, the journeyman guy. I mean, we've seen it happen time and time again with the Cincinnati Bengals, touchdown Jesus, Dane Sonsenbacher. I mean, the list goes on and on for these guys that end up exploding this time of year. Damian Willis, right? I mean, they explode this time of year. Now, whether or not it translates to something special in the regular season, but they make a name for themselves this time of year, be it on special teams and cutting their teeth on offense and everything. So, then it parlays into a final roster spot for some of these players. And Kwame Lassiter seems to maybe have an inside track at a very top heavy wide receiver group, but some openings potentially at the back end of that group.
Yeah, this is around the time where you start to see the first guys kind of emerge, but it's definitely not. There's definitely more time for other guys to eventually make their names. And the Willises of the world, the Sonsenbachers, the Jake Kumerows, like those guys had great preseasons, and we haven't even gotten to a preseason game yet. So right now it's just about who's actually getting reps, right? Who is taking advantage of opportunities, because that's really the only takeaways that we can have from 1 week of training camp. It's just who's healthy and who isn't, because whoever's healthy, they're on the field, they're just going through the motions, they're going through their first practices and whatnot. Just them being out there is a success. In the grand calculus of training camp, health is the only thing that matters. But when it comes to Lassiter, I think Darren Simmons said it himself. The only way he makes the team, and this goes for, I think, Trent Taylor too, or even Trent Irwin, is if they're a punt returner, or if they win that job, I guess. And right now it's still Taylor, I think, is the top guy at the position. But Lassiter's getting plenty of reps. He's out there right behind Taylor. He's working with Simmons in that regard as well. But also, along with that, like you said, with the wide receiver group as a whole, T. Higgins is still not participating in 11-on-11s. He's coming off that surgery. They don't want to rush him, so he's on the rehab field for a lot of practice. And Lassiter is now getting reps with the second team because Mike Thomas is taking Higgins' spot with the first team. So Lassiter is getting reps with the second team. He would be a second string receiver if he were to make the team as the sixth or seventh receiver. So far, so good for him. But he's going to have to prove it in the preseason. We saw it with Alex Erickson 6 years ago when he finally supplanted Brendan Tate as the punt returner. Now Erickson had an explosive preseason and that role. Maybe Lassiter doesn't have to do all of that to supplant Trent Taylor, who is nothing really special at the position. He's just there because he's consistent. Like they trust him to not mess it up. With Lassiter, they're looking for a little bit more. They're looking for just more out of Lassiter compared to Taylor, a little bit more flash, but again, it doesn't have to be crazy.
So that's one of the guys that I've just been getting a little bit of buzz of late. What are some of the others that you have been seeing or hearing? I mean, obviously there's some of the star players looking good. I see Tyler Boyd doing his thing, Joe Mixon having some nice runs at Back Together Saturday and all kinds of different things. But who are some other players that we need to be watching and have been garnering some buzz? You were at the training camp practice yesterday, were you not?
I was, yes. I don't know if you've noticed, but Jamar Chase is pretty good. No
okay.
signs of a sophomore slump there. But again, this time last year, he was looking like he couldn't catch an NFL football. So a lot of these reports have to be taken with a grain of salt. But I think with Chase, it's just the whole trope is that when you enter the second year, things start to slow down and you can play more to your speed now that you know what's going on. And that seems to be the case with him. There's no wasted movement. He's just playing fast and comfortable. So no real worries there, especially with T. Higgins not practicing fully at the moment. But again, he's on his way back. I want to give a shout out to Dax Hill, though, because he's got the benefit of being in communications with Jesse Bates. Like that relationship and that partnership is not experiencing wear and tear or any negative side effects as of now. But him just filling in as the starter, which he has been for the entire offseason. But now that the pads are on and there's a lot more on his shoulders, I think it's been overwhelmingly a positive experience for him as the free safety going through the individual drills and then being 11-on-11s. The defense has forced a lot of turnovers, which is naturally what happens at this time in preseason, especially when you have a backup
Brandon
quarterback
Allen.
leading the ones. Yeah, of course. But Hill, I think, has been involved in at least 2 turnovers. I think he forced a fumble, and I think he ended up with an interception along with, I think, Eli Apple's got an interception. Akeem Davis-Gaither has got his hands on the ball. College free agent Delonte Hood, who's looking to make maybe the practice squad at cornerback out of Peru State, wherever that is. He got an interception, I think, on the last play of Monday's practice. So secondary as a whole has been really sharp, really able to read Brandon Allen's eyes. And again, limited playbook, limited arm talent in Brandon Allen. But I think Hill kind of just finding his feet pretty early in that role, playing next to Von Bell and not looking out of place, I think is definitely a win, especially because, again, he wasn't really that much of a safety at Michigan. He was a slot cornerback. Now he's playing in 2 deep shells or maybe even single high looks. He's playing closer or further away from the line of scrimmage more than he has since like he played in high school. So for him to look at the least bit natural there so far through camp is definitely a win.
John, can we talk about the tight end group? The tight end group is shaping up well, and maybe not in a way that a lot of people envision. I'm seeing some stuff from Drew Sample, not what you want necessarily out of a former second-round pick, but he's in this Ryan Hewitt type of H-back, fullback-ish role in some packages, and he's getting out there and making some blocks. Again, not necessarily the type of yield you want from a second-round pick, but if it's a useful role and a helpful role in this offense to continue to pave way in the run game and you know, kind of create some mismatches here and there, I'm for it. And then you got the new addition. Everybody's excited about Lael Collins, of course. Everybody's excited about Alex Cappa, of course, and Ted Karras for all of the right reasons. But lost in the mix of that is this team-friendly deal that they struck with Hayden Hurst. And he made a very nice contested catch. By the way, Dax Hill was right on him. I saw a clip of that. Dax Hill, it was right on him, and Hayden Hurst is, you know, showing some nice things so far in camp. And, you know, of course, you've got Higgins when he comes back and doing his thing, and then you've got Chase and then Boyd. But this is going to be a guy who's going to be in the mix, I would say, pretty often, much like a CJ Uzomah, if not more so, should he stay healthy and keep doing what he's doing.
Yeah, he's like the definition of buying low on someone because of the situations that he's been in with Baltimore and with Atlanta, never truly emerging as the number one, but having the talent to kind of do more than what he's been given in terms of opportunity. And now he has that opportunity. And the overwhelming consensus is, like, athletically, he definitely fits the bill of a former first-round pick who ran like a 4.6 40 coming out of college a few years ago. And that athleticism, albeit, again, very limited playbook. They're not asking him to stretch the field that much yet. It's just a lot of lateral routes and a lot of out routes to the side at the moment. But he's gaining separation. And when he's not gaining separation, he's using that 6'5", 6'6" frame to make catches away from his body. And I don't think a lot of balls are hitting the ground when passes are thrown his way. So, again, very early signs, but definitely looking like the tight end that they were expecting. And that's, I don't want to say, I mean, in some ways an upgrade from CJ Uzomah because of the things that he can do athletically, you know, the same reliability in terms of his hands, but the ability to kind of, you know, stress defenses vertically and keep guys honest and opening up space for your Tyler Boyds of the world, for your Jamar Chase slants, for your T. Higgins over the middle catches. Having that guy in Hurst that can stretch the field, but can be relied upon in those contested situations. That's really all you want from a tight end, and they're getting that at a cheap price. So definitely looking like a positive investment so far.
Who else do we need to chat about? I'm hearing some good things about Zachary Carter, and maybe some others in there. I mean, who else should we be spotlighting and/or keeping our eyes on, especially as these preseason games are on the horizon?
Well, I think just going back to injuries, like, it hasn't been all negative. Like, Lael Collins still hasn't been practicing, but he's working on the side. But both Joseph Asai and Alex Cappa, they started the training camp. Like, I think they both started on the PUP list, or maybe no, Asai did not start on the PUP list. Cappa did start on the PUP list. He was activated. He quickly went through just individual drills at first. And now he's being integrated into 11 on 11s, which is definitely positive. I don't think he practiced that much the last time on Tuesday. It was Akeem Adeniji in a right guard for him. But Osai had his first padded practice yesterday as of this recording, and it doesn't look like anything's physically limiting him, which is definitely important. Like, he's a year removed from tearing his meniscus, which is a pretty severe injury. It's not doesn't get the publicity of like a torn ACL, but it's what I believe took Andrew Billings out of commission when he was a rookie. So it was almost like the same timeline. Billings missed his entire rookie season. Then he came back very strong as a second-year player in 2017. And Osai, I think, is on that same trajectory. Very limited reps yesterday. He was going up against Isaiah Prince, which upset a lot of people on Twitter because Isaiah Prince did not look very good in that one rep that I filmed of him. But Osai being as explosive as he was coming out of Texas, but being able to kind of cut and turn on that knee is what is important right now. And he has that trust. And obviously the coaches have that trust that he can do that. Otherwise they wouldn't have put him in pads and put him through these drills. So he's definitely looking 100% healthy. No real setbacks, nothing really holding him back. So shout out to him.
And again, I mentioned his name, Zachary Carter. He's been flashing a little bit. I believe it was Dan Hort, I could be wrong about that, who was talking about him doing a lot of nice things at practice. So quietly, I mean, we talk about how important Trey Hendrickson is, and DJ Reader and Sam Hubbard and all of these guys, and for good reasons. They're starters. They get heavy amounts of snaps and whatnot. But two very, very important players on this defense are Zachary Carter, presumably, if he's going to be in there as that rotational, get inside, maybe kick outside here and there. And then, of course, who you just mentioned, Joseph Osai, to give them a little extra juice and another rotational edge rusher, kind of like what Carl Lawson was early in his career, that rotational guy that would come in and seemingly just kind of bring that extra spark from those others that he was a little bit behind on the depth chart. That's what we're hoping for out of Joseph Osai. And it sounds like, at least early, he's providing a little bit of that excitement that we saw through only one game of the preseason last year.
And I think with Carter, I mean, you got to remember, like, he was all over the line at Florida during his years there. And now he's basically a full-time defensive tackle, either playing over the shoulder of the tackle or over the shoulder of the guard. But with this defensive tackle group that they have, like, he's the only real chance that they have of a pass rushing presence behind BJ Hill. So him at this point showing any positive process as a pass rusher in terms of just stringing together moves and generating pressure and generating push in the pocket, it's definitely a plus. And that's what he showed in pads for the first time yesterday. It's important to know he's listed as 290 on the official team roster. And I believe he was around 280 when he was testing at the combine. So I think he's gained some weight. The coaches have said that he played at 290 in Florida, so this is a weight that he's familiar with, but it's definitely more closer to that interior player. So if he's able to maintain whatever explosion and speed that he has at a weight where he can survive inside, it's definitely good for him. But I'm excited to see how he fares up in the preseason against backup offensive linemen, albeit he's going up against mostly backup offensive linemen right now. But him just to be more than just a guy who just kind of just runs straight at the offensive line right now, it's very important because they need alternative options at interior pass rusher behind BJ Hill.
For sure. Injuries before we start, we kind of move on here. Nothing. I mean, you mentioned kind of, some of the guys who were initially coming into camp, not expected to practice, not expected to play, and how they've been eased in and out of there. Anything of note that we need to be caught up on that has transpired during camp?
So we already mentioned Kappa. He started on the pup. He's activated. Now he's on track to being a full participant sometime, probably next week. Osai is fine. Higgins, I think he's pretty close to being a full participant. Again, he's participating in drills and whatnot, but they're giving him time to rehab and rest and whatnot. I think he was seen on the practice field yesterday, kind of frustrated. I'm tired of being over on this field. I want to be out there with the guys and pads and whatnot. So I think he's pretty close to coming back. And there's nothing tremendously wrong with him. Again, he's coming off of off-season surgery, and they don't want to rush him when they don't have to. Other than that, Khalid Kareem, he's still on the PUP list. Brandon Wilson, he's still on the PUP list. Joe Bocci, he's still on the PUP list. And Lel Collins is still on the non-football injury list. But all those guys are doing rehab work on the side field. Nothing too long-term with any of them. I guess with Kareem and I guess with the guys on the PUP, it's more of a wait and see. But Collins is listed as day-to-day, and I mean that could mean anything. But he looks okay. Again, they're not pushing him too much, and we won't really see how he's doing until they start pushing him. But for now, no setbacks, it looks like.
Yeah, and then you're, of course, seeing a lot of these players in the helmet shells to help alleviate, possible concussion issues and all of that. So that's good. And then, of course, you've got Zach Taylor and company still kind of adopting that mindset and that approach from last year, wherein proper rest, making sure they really have this open line of communication with players in terms of, is there an potential to a soft tissue injury or a ligament, these things that lead down the road, and it really helped them stay largely healthy last year. And I think they're still adopting that mindset, it would seem. So hopefully, especially with the one less preseason game once again and other factors, we're hoping that the injury bug kind of stays away from Cincinnati once again this year, because that is for sure going to be needed to continue their possible championship run here. This is the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. He's John Sheeran. I'm Anthony Cosenza. We're talking a little training camp update with the Cincinnati Bengals. We've got a couple other things on tap, and just want to remind all of you that you can get this show and the other great shows on the Cincy Jungle podcast channel, Coach Speak and Chalk Talk with Coach Matt Minnick, as well as Talking Football with Bengal, Jim, and friends, and our show, the Orange and Black Insider, on the Cincy Jungle podcast channel through your favorite audio streamer, whether that's iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio. We are on all the major platforms there. Go subscribe to the Cincy Jungle podcast channel. Leave us a review, hopefully a 5-star one. Helps us continue to grow the channel and let us stroke our egos a little bit, but also just let us know how we're doing. Let us know what you like, maybe what you don't like, all that kind of stuff. But hopefully you're enjoying all of the stuff that we are putting out there for you. You can also, if you like the video, you can give a thumbs up to the Cincy Jungle Facebook page, about 90,000 strong there or so. And then, of course, you can get the YouTube videos by subscribing to our YouTube channel down by the icon underneath the SB Nation Cincy Jungle logo. If you were watching our live video there, click that. And then, of course, the bell to be notified when we go live, when new content is available. We're coming up on some milestone follows and or subscribers, be it from our Twitter account and or our YouTube channel. So maybe we'll do another fun giveaway. We got to incentivize the hell out of these people, John. We got to get them we got to give them prizes or tease them with prizes to get them to donate to the Pollack Family Foundation. Then, of course, maybe we'll do a little giveaway as well for some milestone subscribers and followers. But we appreciate all the support. We joke, obviously, but we appreciate all the support, right, John?
Absolutely. You guys are all good people, but it doesn't hurt to have a little bit more incentive, to push you guys in the right direction.
We all need a push, right? Yeah. We all need a push. All right. Well, we're gonna talk a little bit about some kind of fun things here with the Cincinnati Bengals. So here's the State Your Case coming up. Well, John, we've kind of known that the city of Cincinnati, I'm not from there. I've been there. I love it. We've known that the city of Cincinnati is great, and it's got a lot of cool things, a lot of great things about the city, a ton of great people. But a new added dimension of cool obviously came with the arrival of Joe Burrow to the Cincinnati Bengals. Joe Cool, right? I mean, that's just how it goes with that. And with Joe Cool, there's been this ushering in of I don't know what you want to call it, but a lot of different initiatives, and you can tie it to him, you can tie it to just the front office, and rightfully so, the front office doing a lot of different things to bring the team to modern times, if you will. And talk about the Ring of Honor, talk about all kinds, all the things we've talked about for months and months and months on this program and through various different platforms. But now, John, the Bengals are doing something that continues to make them a very, very cool NFL franchise. And one of the things that we have been hearing rumor-wise is in some of the proposed improvements being made to the Paul Brown Stadium grounds. Have you heard about this?
I have, yeah. There's some renderings online.
There are some renderings online, and we will pull this up for you here on, I think this is from WCPO, but my gosh, this is the coolest of the cool, my friend. I mean, we're talking a live sports betting club, a nightclub, let me pull up all this stuff, and there are renderings here. This is again WCPO, I believe, in Cincinnati. You look at this, my word, it is crazy what they're talking about. Standing room only decks, drink rails, nightclub, a sky bridge to connect the upper concourses, and then I mentioned the live sports betting club. This is Vegas-esque, my friend. This is like the Raiders' new stadium. I don't know exactly what it's going to be like and what their envision is, but this is really, really awesome stuff, really cool stuff. And you just, to me, following this team and a little bit of button down middle America and whatnot, when you're talking about a nightclub at the football stadium, you're talking about a sports betting club, whatever that may look like, this is cool stuff, man. I'm pretty psyched about this. I don't know if you are, if other Bengals fans are. Again, yet to be seen totally what this idea looks like, but this is really, really neat.
Yeah, let's show the viewers like the renderings. I believe there was like a picture of, I think that's on the stadium. They're going to update the north scoreboard and like take out I believe like the second deck of seats, but like put like a mezzanine behind, and they're going to have like standing room only type of mezzanines on one of the corners as well. When you talk about all the amenities included here, like this is like a $500 million renovation. So hopefully the stadium like has more stuff to do inside of it, because it's got the moniker of like a prison for the past 20 years with the gray kind of concrete interior that's going on. There's not that much to do in it. So yeah, it's definitely behind the times compared to the SoFis of the world or the Roomba Las Vegas stadium. You have just every stadium now is $1 billion or multi-billion dollar investment with the hopes of hosting the Super Bowl. And Mike Brown said it himself, like he doesn't envision in Cincinnati there ever being some type of Taj Mahal type stadium along the banks of the Ohio. It doesn't really fit with the aesthetic and just the vibe of the city in general. So the overall, I think, look of the stadium from the outside will remain the same, but there would definitely be upgrades and enhancements in terms of just the structure of the stadium. Like that obviously needs to be updated. It's 25 years old by the time a lot of these things will be finished. But when we talk about a nightclub, sports betting bar, or anything else in there that fans might be interested in, the stadium needs to be valuable to the county itself, because the county will have to decide if they want to renew the lease to pay for all of this. Like Hamilton County taxpayers are going to be financing most, if not all, of these upgrades. So they're going to have to find ways to incentivize people who live in Cincinnati or near Cincinnati to visit Paul Brown Stadium for things that don't even have anything to do with the Bengals. Like you can host a wedding there, you can have parties there, and if you have
concerts,
amenities such as concerts, if you have amenities such like as a nightclub, I mean, for at least some people, that's a positive return on investment. So these are definitely a lot of cool things. And if you're not going to build a new stadium or completely redo the structure integrity of Paul Brown Stadium, just making more stuff to do, or just a nicer interior, and just making sure that the stadium stays upright and is fit with the times from an engineering standpoint, that's really all that matters here. And it's not going to be a multi-billion dollar investment like we said, but it's still going to be a good chunk of change for Hamilton County taxpayers. And I think they want to see that money go to useful things. And maybe there might be some older taxpayers that want nothing to do with a nightclub necessarily, but this is definitely for the future of, I guess, the population of the county, and also just the future of where the team is going. And if people want to visit Paul Brown Stadium to watch Joe Burrow play for the Bengals, they want to visit a stadium that they can have fun in. I think this is kind of progressing towards that.
It is, and I mean, we're showing a lot of different pictures. And John, do you know where they got one of the designers, I think? Do you know where one of these the people coming up with these renderings? Do you know where they got
I'm assuming it's from your neck of the woods there, my friend.
Here it is right here, Los Angeles based. Los Angeles based. That's why it's so cool. I'm kidding, obviously. But no, regardless, really, really neat. And it's just every year for the past 3 years, 4 years now, there's just these exciting changes, whether it's getting a Joe Burrow, whether it's the Ring of Honor, whether it's, all of these different things, and these stadium renderings, man, this is just, it's fun. And you just keep talking about all this cool stuff and the changes. And now it's almost like now they're just playing catch up from all the years that they were so far behind. Now it's just like boom, 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 boom. It's one after another. It's a big domino effect of all of these big changes, and it's almost hard to keep up with all of them. The helmets, right? The jerseys, right? I mean, the whole deal.
It's all kind of coinciding with, the firing of Marvin Lewis and the drafting of Joe Burrow. And I wonder if, some of these things would still be coming just because the lease is up in 5 years and they can extend or like push that expiration date down the road for like another 5 years or so. But they still they want to remain in Cincinnati and they want to, not force this upon taxpayers like they did 30 years ago, which is what kind of villainized Mike Brown in the first place with that whole stadium deal in the mid-90s. So the fact that the team is good, the fact that the team is marketable, freaking Paul Brown Stadium might not be called Paul Brown Stadium anymore because of that simple fact there. You're right. It's just a lot of stuff happening all at once. But I do wonder if these things would have still been happening just because the stadium deal is up. But now, because of all those things that I just mentioned, I think it's more appeasing to the people who are actually going to pay for this.
It is. And, again, it could be a little bit more of a multi-use, type of facility than just the Bengals games being held there, at least more so than it already is. So really cool stuff, cool artist renderings. We put the link in the live chats there from WCPO to see all the artist renderings and mock-ups of what they're thinking about doing. So go check that out. Really cool stuff. Do we even dare talk about, to close up, state your case, do we even dare talk about the Deshaun Watson stuff? We covered it a little bit on the Happening Headline show yesterday. A little bit more of an update today, John.
Yeah, so just for the sake of it being topical, 5 hours ago, the NFL officially decided to appeal the suspension of Deshaun Watson. Watson was, Judge Sue Robinson recommended that Watson be suspended 6 games, and that was going to be the suspension if the NFL decided not to appeal. They used their right to appeal, and now it's going to either Roger Goodell or his designee to kind of oversee the appeal. He could choose, I guess, an owner in that case, but it kind of feels like it's going to go back to Goodell because the NFL did want to hand out an indefinite suspension for Deshaun Watson for the findings that they found within their investigation, and those findings were then corroborated by Judge Sue Robinson and her findings. And the only reason why she didn't hand out a lengthier suspension than 6 games is because of the NFL's own terrible precedent for handling sexual misconduct, sexual assault, domestic abuse cases. And she didn't want to set the precedent herself. She left that potentially to Goodell, and in all likelihood, Goodell and the NFL will exercise their right to suspend Watson with the length that they want to. It could go to court. They could file for an injunction, which has happened with Ezekiel Elliott. It's happened with Tom Brady, and those players played while their cases were happening, and then they were suspended later on. So this very well could lead to Deshaun Watson playing in week 1 for the Cleveland Browns, or maybe even the entirety of the 2022 season. But rest assured, the suspension is still coming. Like, Goodell will eventually reach a suspension that cannot be discussed. It can't be debated. It's whatever he says is final. It just might go to court first. But Anthony, the case against Watson is pretty damning, and it doesn't seem like a court is going to kind of favor for an injunction here. It kind of seems like the NFL has the evidence that they need to give out the suspension that they want for Watson. And I know people are saying, "Oh, you can't undermine the judge for her first ruling with this agreement with the NFL's Player Association and the NFL." But really, the rulings that she found is that, yeah, he did all these things, and I just don't want to be the one who suspends him for the entire season.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if this thing changes here. And I know you and I were a little surprised a few weeks ago when we had Jeff Lloyd on from the Lockdown Browns podcast when he said, "Yeah, I'm thinking 6 to 8 games," right? I mean, we thought it was going to be 10, 12, maybe a full season. I still don't think it's going to be a full season. I don't even know if it's going to be 12, but I don't know that 6 is going to stick. I would not be surprised if this gets changed here.
No, they want an indefinite suspension because, to their credit, they recognize that what he did is unprecedented in their history of awful cases of sexual misconduct and domestic abuse and everything that kind of falls under that umbrella. So to the NFL's credit, they tried to set a new precedent, because the precedent that they have with these cases is inexcusably lenient when it comes to what the
and all over the map, even
100% too. The inconsistencies is why Robinson was appointed judge and was given the chance to be the independent arbiter, which is what, like, they wanted to take this out of Goodell's hands, because he proved that he was inept in this regard and completely inconsistent and just relying on public outcry. And they might still be relying on public outcry to an extent, but if that is what gets them to make the progress that they need to actually take these cases seriously and to actually show a semblance of caring about women in the sport and just in general, then that's still progress. So, like, the suspension is coming. They want it. They realize that the evidence is too damning. He did it. He's not remorseful for it. So that's not going to go well for a settlement. It's just an ugly situation that never should have got this far. But rest assured, Deshaun Watson will be suspended for a decent amount of time.
Yep, I am in agreement with you. All right. That's a little bit of state your case. We do that from time to time, where we give opinions and talk about all kinds of different things. So hopefully you enjoy that. All right, let's get to briefly. We always say briefly on these, but let's get to the remaining teams. We did in-depth interviews from people who cover the AFC North teams. So go back and check those out to get a little preview of what's going on with the division. John and I went through other divisions that the Bengals face. We did AFC East, NFC South, and now we've got the three other teams here, John, that comprise the rest of their schedule, and they were all first place teams within their respective divisions last year, all made the playoffs last year, and the Cincinnati Bengals against them went a combined 3-0. So we've got the Dallas Cowboys, the Tennessee Titans, and the Kansas City Chiefs. The Titans were the 1 seed, I believe, right, in the postseason last year. And then you had the Chiefs, who had the 1 seed and then lost to the Bengals. And the whole thing kind of snowballed into this Bengals momentum in the late season into and through the postseason. Bengals did not face Dallas last year. Dallas had a good season last year. Let's start there, if you're okay with that, because I think a little bit more interest will be paid to the other teams that the Bengals will be rematching against from last year's playoff game. So let's start with the Dallas Cowboys. We will pull up their roster on their official team here. This is a team, John, to me. Now, I don't pretend to know absolutely in depth of everything that the Dallas Cowboys do and every single player on here. But from what I've seen in roster attrition and just some other things going on here, potentially they were maybe trying to lure Sean Payton away, some of the rumors there, and there's maybe some other mutiny type of things like that, I guess, going on behind the scenes. You lose Amari Cooper, you lose La'el Collins, Connor Williams, right, gone. I mean, so there are some questions on this team. Their division remains and a lot of questions remain there between the Eagles, the Cowboys, the Commanders. And, I mean, there's just questions all over the place, right? This team, though, I don't really see them as big of a threat as they were maybe last year or even a couple of years ago, prime Zeke, etc.
Yeah, it definitely seems like last year was the year for them to actually do something when they had Amari Cooper, when they had that entire offensive line together. Their defense, though, it definitely held them back, and they ended up in a lot of shootouts. And Dak Prescott, I'm a fan of him. I think he deserves more credit than he's gotten. I think he's definitely worth that contract that he has. He keeps them in a lot of games, and I think offensive coordinator Kellen Moore is really good at what he does. So they have a good relationship. They have a good system in place on offense. And like you said, like, main 3 losses here are Amari Cooper, wide receiver, Connor Williams at left guard, and La'el Collins at right tackle. They're replacing 2 of those guys with rookies, albeit high round rookies, and Tyler Smith at left guard and Jalen Tolbert at wide receiver. And then Terrence Steele at right tackle, who, let's call him average at best, I guess. But, they found him to be more dependable in terms of staying on the field compared to La'el. So offensively, I think it's still like an above average unit because they have a clear above average quarterback. They have 2 really good receivers in CeeDee Lamb and Michael Gallup. But Gallup is still not 100% healthy. I don't think he's practicing as of yet. And this game, I think, is pretty early in the Bengals season. I think it's like week 2 or something. So I don't know if Gallup is going to play in that game or even be 100%. But even on his own, CeeDee Lamb is one of the, I think, 10 or 15 at least best receivers in the NFL, and he's so dynamic, and that was such a great pick for them.
Very good. You look at the corners here, Deron Bland, Anthony Brown, Kyron Brown, of course, Trevon Diggs, big play, looking for a place to happen. CJ Goodwin, Kelvin Joseph, Jordan Lewis, some good names in there. You go down to, the defensive ends group. Of course, DeMarcus Lawrence. You got Dante Fowler Jr., a guy who's been around the league, former high pick, bounced around, has had some highs and lows in terms of production. They got Basham in there as well. So some names that can create a couple of problems off the edge.
Yeah, so DeMarcus Lawrence is a beast, 100%. Mm-hmm. He's one of the best pass rushers in the NFL. They no longer have Robert Quinn. That was a few years ago. I was thinking back to that. But other than that, like on defensive line, like Micah Parsons plays on the edge, and he's a dangerous player in his own right. It's like Lawrence and Parsons and then Trevon Diggs with like his interception game. And then it's just a really questionable defense all throughout. I didn't even know that Anthony Barr was on this defense. He's the middle linebacker. I think because Leighton Vander Esch is either still injured or whatnot, but even when he's healthy, like he's still a pretty good player. So the defense, again, was a problem for them last year. They gave up a lot of big plays. They gave up a lot of points. And it's one of the reasons why they ended up losing in the first round of the wild card game. But it's defensively definitely top heavy with stars. Parsons is so good at what he does. I still don't know like what position he is. Like I think he plays mostly off ball linebacker, but he's such a dangerous edge rusher that, when he blitzes off the edge, like you need to account for that. And you're already going to have a situation where you want more attention on DeMarcus Lawrence. So when you have both those guys coming off the edge at the same time, regardless of how good your tackles are, you're going to be in for a long day.
Parsons is almost like a front end defender akin to what Polamalu was to the Steelers in the back end of the defense. It's just kind of like, just go play, right? I mean, it's just instinctual, just be around the ball because it's hard to wrangle you in, and it's just, you're going to do your thing. And Polamalu was like that, kind of on the middle and back end of that defense for the Steelers for so many years. And it now seems that Parsons is that guy on the front portions of the defense for the Cowboys there. You've got Gallimore and Odigizua in the middle there of that defense, interior linemen. So here's where you kind of mentioned it a little bit, where the Cowboys have had to really make a lot of adjustments. You mentioned what they did at right tackle. Obviously, Connor Williams now gone. What do you make of this offensive line here? You've got a couple of names that are recognizable here, but gone is that true offensive line juggernaut from a few years ago where they had basically every single player was Pro Bowl caliber.
Yeah, I think when healthy,
big question here, by the way. Sorry, Tyler Smith. Big question mark there. A guy who's got a lot of talent, but some people are going, how ready is he to play?
I mean, he's next to another athletic freak who knows a thing or two about being an athletic freak on offensive line. Tyron Smith, when healthy, I almost thought he was like underrated at his peak because he could move like no other. I remember like highlights at SC and him like pulling around the line of scrimmage. He's a freaking mutant at left tackle, but now he's like 31 years old and he's been dealing with injuries in recent years. But when he's on, he's still one of the best left tackles in the NFL. Zach Martin is still arguably the best right guard in the NFL, but as we've seen with offensive lines, like two really good players doesn't make up for potential liabilities elsewhere. So how quick can Tyler Smith, get his feet from under him? Tyler, be a Daze at center. He's, he needs to take that next step too, because right now he's nothing more than just a middling guy. And Terrence Steele, there's some, decent weeks of decent play, but the lows are really low for him. So it's definitely a questionable unit.
Really interesting. We know Dak's going to make plays and if they kind of go as he goes. You mentioned the wide receivers, some talent there. We didn't really talk too much about the running backs here before we transition maybe to some other teams here. Who knows what you're going to get from Ezekiel Elliott, right? It's like just a wow game, or where are you, right? I mean, from where he was at the beginning of his career to now, it's just, where he, and then Pollard is a guy who's emerged and been a pretty good player for them in the backfield there. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do at the running back spot.
I mean, Pollard's just a better athlete at this point. Like with Zeke, it's the classic case of just wear and tear at the running back spot. He's been in the league for now 6-7 years, and he's carried the ball like 4,000 times. So there's just a lot of tread. There's not a lot of tread left on those tires. And with Pollard, he just enters the games more fresh. And whenever he gets the ball, there's just more explosion with the way he carries it. And he just makes more use of the touches that he gets compared to Zeke. Like in the beginning of the season, Zeke looks fine because he's still pretty talented. But as the season wears on, this has been the case for the past couple of years. You just see Pollard be more effective. So, the more times that Zeke touches the ball, I think for the Bengals, that's a good thing.
Yeah, and kind of closing up on the tight end spot, you see Sprinkle and Schultz. Those are some guys that Schultz is a pretty good player that could, they can give you some problems. But overall, to me, John, they're aside from a couple of mismatch stuff and pass rush issues that they could provide the Bengals. Some talent at the wide receiver spots. Again, you kind of said it well. A very top heavy team. And I don't know how deep the substance is behind that. And that's what makes them a tough team, but not necessarily a scary one, if that makes sense to you.
They'll definitely survive in their division because they play the Commanders and the Giants. But yeah, in a vacuum against another good team of the Bengals, it's going to be tough for them. So it's going to be close, I would say.
Yeah. Here's the other team here that I don't, again, do they take a step back from where they were last year? They kind of, in some people's eyes, overachieved. I believe Vrabel was the coach of the year last year for what this team went through, especially without having Derrick Henry for about half the season. But, you talk about these good teams and these teams that have been good for quite a while here. You get some attrition. And now no Julio, no A.J. Brown. And so what do you make of the Tennessee Titans, a team that the Bengals went in and shocked the in the divisional round there? I mean, what do you make of this team here and what they've done this offseason? Again, kind of not the same roster for the most part that we looked at in the postseason just last year.
I look at that playoff game and I feel like as someone who's like both of us, we've followed the Bengals and we've seen like tumultuous playoff losses and how that can affect a team going forward. And just the way that Tannehill played in that game and the fact that they've now lost A.J. Brown at receiver. Like Julio was okay for them, but he wasn't nearly the same player that he was in Atlanta. But they've had to redo the receiver group to an extent. Like Robert Woods is good, but he's not A.J. Brown. Treylon Burks is a talented rookie, but he might need like a year or two to really get his feet wet. And Tannehill, man, it doesn't seem like there's at least from the outside looking in, like I don't imagine there's a ton of confidence in him from the fans or even from the players that he can take them to where they want to go. It kind of seems like last year was like their peak and they just couldn't do anything with it because as we saw, like Derrick Henry is a beast. Like no one is denying that talent, but he can't carry you to a Super Bowl if Ryan Tannehill is your quarterback and he throws 3 interceptions in the game, and now it's just going to be tougher for him because his receiver group has diminished.
Really interested in these two guys here, Christian Fulton and Caleb Farley, two, kind of high-end cornerback picks here, and I'm really curious to see how these two develop. I mean, they're entering kind of some critical years here, and I don't know how enamored they are with everything going on there, but those are two guys. And then of course, here's a former Bengal, Greg Maben right there. You got some others in here. McCreary, who's a rookie corner, Elijah Molden. So, I mean, they've got some talent at the cornerback spots here. So that's definitely an area in which to, watch.
Yeah. I think both Farley and Fulton are pretty talented. Like Fulton had his way a few times against the Bengals. Chase didn't really do too much against them aside from the screen that he caught early in the game. Farley was, I think, injured for most of last offseason. He was drafted after he had surgery or something like that. So cornerbacks definitely more of a question mark compared to safeties where they probably have the best tandem in the league in Kevin Byard and Amani Hooker. Hooker, a little bit less known than Byard, who I think I remember like Deion Sanders didn't know who Kevin Byard was. And Byard like kind of added him like mad on Twitter, but both are good. And I think Hooker is definitely one of the more underrated players in the NFL. He was PFF's 3rd graded safety last year, and Byard happened to be the 1st.
Yep. Byard is a very, very good football player. Very good football player. All right, let's kind of transition a little bit to the offensive side of the ball here. They're sticking with Tannehill. They did bring in Malik Willis. They've got former Bengal Logan Woodside rounding out the quarterback roster spot there. Do you see Ryan Tannehill has had, since he has joined the Tennessee Titans, there were a couple of nice seasons in Miami, and since he has joined the Tennessee Titans, he has enjoyed kind of a nice renaissance there for the most part. There have been a lot of, it's been, the play action has worked amazing. He's seemingly more comfortable there than he ever was in Miami. It just has worked. Now, there have been obviously some big game issues, none more prevalent than probably the one against the Bengals last year. And he, to his credit and whatnot, kind of spoke out about, man, I had to kind of seek help. I was not in a good place after that game last year. So now he comes back as the leader of this team, now without Julio Jones and AJ Brown. I mean, I don't know, man. This has to be kind of a make or break year for Tannehill here, which is kind of what his career has almost been kind of defined with year after year.
Yeah, and I don't think that he's a bad quarterback by any means. Like he's been one of the more efficient quarterbacks since he took over that starting job a couple of years ago. And one of the reasons why, like I thought when Zach Taylor was hired and there were like some rumors about the Bengals trading for Tannehill or signing Tannehill in case he got released, I thought it made sense. I thought he was like that high-end bridge quarterback that would just keep the ship afloat while the new coach can evaluate the roster. And Tannehill has done that and then some. Obviously, winning 12 games is not nothing, but there is a reason why they drafted the quarterback, albeit they waited until the third round to draft him. But Malik Willis has that ceiling that is higher than what Tannehill is right now. And Tannehill is quietly 34 years old. Like he's an athletic quarterback, but that athleticism doesn't really transfer much when you enter your mid 30s. And, not everyone's Tom Brady. So at a certain point, like Tannehill is going to hit that cliff. It may not be this year, but again, he might not be anything more than just an above average quarterback that probably isn't going to be enough to get you to the promised land.
Yeah. And then of course, it'll go as Derrick Henry goes. I mean, obviously just absolute beast at the running back spot. I feel like their offensive line, their defensive line, they'll be stout. Vrabel's gonna make sure that that's the case. It's really, is there enough sizzle elsewhere? Is there enough firepower? Is Ryan Tannehill going to play well in the big games? Again, one of these teams a little bit like the Cowboys where, hey, this is going to be a tough game, but I don't know that this is truly, a shaking in your boots type of game for the Bengals based on a little bit of the moves and some of the transition they've undergone in a short period of time.
Yeah, just to close it out, like we can't discount what their defensive line did to
very
the
good.
Bengals. Yeah,
very good.
And even with the Bengals improving, like that's still a talented defensive line that will sack quarterbacks every single week. Bud Dupree's not a top tier edge rusher, but he's definitely solid. Harold Landry, I think he's a little bit better. Danico Audrey, he's still kicking it. Jeffrey Simmons, one of the more dominant interior players. Awesome. Yeah, they have four guys that can get to you on every single down, and even against quality offensive lines, like they give guys fits. So, like Tannehill's probably gonna have to just go off on like a Joe Flacco type run for them to ever do anything in the postseason, and maybe that happens, maybe it doesn't. But their defense is stout enough to keep them in games with Henry.
Mm-hmm. And the Bengals obviously did some learning from last postseason, shoring up the offensive line going up against teams like this. And then lastly, we've got the Kansas City Chiefs, and we all know there's firepower here. But here's the thing: as you look at these teams, John, and you look at the Bengals and where they are and their, what happened with them this offseason, there wasn't a lot of high-end attrition of the Bengals roster. CJ Uzomah's a loss. That's kind of one of the more major ones. But since they have rebuilt through the draft, and then they're in the middle of a lot of these free agency contracts that are working out so well for them, you're not seeing a lot of their high-end players leave or needing to trade them or whatever. So when you look at these teams, we talked about Tennessee losing A.J. Brown. We talked about Dallas losing Amari Cooper, and now you're talking about Kansas City losing Tyreek Hill. You could say Kelsey's their biggest weapon. I mean, it was Hill, it was Kelsey. Those two being on the field at the same time, was just such a dynamic thing that brought so many mismatches to other teams, and now you lose that dynamic. They've tried to replace Hill with a lot of different things. I guess obviously you've got Mahomes, you've got Kelsey, you've got all these other players on here that are good players, but just in general, that's the first thing that leaps out at you when you talk about the Chiefs and them facing the Bengals. The Bengals now don't have to game plan for a Tyreek Hill and a Travis Kelce at the same time.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure why they didn't go more into paying Tyreek Hill. I don't know if he didn't want to be there, if they just felt like they got the best years out of him and decided to just let him go so they don't deal with the ramifications of him regressing while they're paying him $30 million a year. But like that type of receiver is just impossible to emulate. It's impossible to replace. Like Marquise Valdez-Scantling from Green Bay, he's not downgrading a quarterback going from Aaron Rodgers to Patrick Mahomes, but this is going to be such an interesting year for Mahomes because he still has Kelsey, still probably the best tight end in the NFL. He still has probably the best offensive line in the NFL, but he doesn't have that game breaker that he can just lob it up 60 yards down the field and he'll be under it, ready to catch it with 10 yards of separation, throwing up the deuces. So him without like that elite top tier wide receiver, he still has the tight end, but him without that vertical threat on the outside, I really am interested to see how this offense evolves. Andy Reid is a genius when it comes to offensive game planning and schematics, but it's going to be a really interesting year for Mahomes without him.
It is, and we here just kind of going alphabetical in terms of position groups. I mean, you look at the cornerback group, McDuffie, a big addition. You and I both really liked him when we were talking about him and going into this class here. But I mean, you look at, think about Fenton and Snead in the games. Problems. There were some problems in this cornerback group as it came with the Cincinnati Bengals. McDuffie, a big addition there, and then you've got some others in here that are defensive backs here, and then you look at the defensive line. Of course, you've got Frank Clark, Calhoun, Shalik Calhoun, and others here. I mean. You bring in Karlaftis, who went one pick before Dax Hill was selected by the Cincinnati Bengals. Look, oh, by the way, who's down at the bottom there, Mr. Carlos Dunlap, bringing in some edge depth there. Overall, I mean, I like Karlaftis. I think a lot of people liked him. I had the chance to speak with him briefly. Really nice guy. Carlos Dunlap, and then some others in here. I think this defensive line will still bring some fits here as they did throughout much of last year, just especially now with a couple of other additions.
Yeah, it's definitely their best positional group on defense. They still had success against the Bengals in both the Week 17 game and the championship game. Chris Jones is still a beast. He's one of the few guys that's better at Jeffrey Simmons at playing defensive tackle. I think Karlaftis is going to be really good immediately. Like, he comes into the NFL already knowing what to do. As a pass rusher, he knows how to win despite not being an all-around amazing athlete in terms of flexibility. He's just going to win with power, and I think Dunlap can teach him a thing or two about how to utilize the gifts that he has. And Dunlap is, I think at this point, just one of those situational edge rushers at 32, 33 years old now for him. So for him to be on a team that presumably will be up in most games, and he'll get a lot of pass rushing opportunities late in the game. Pretty happy for him that he has that. Frank Clark is still okay. Like, he's still a starter in the NFL. So that defensive line is definitely stout. And, there's a reason why they let Charvarius Ward go. He was burnt toast against the Bengals in that first game, and they replaced him with McDuffie. But McDuffie's still a rookie cornerback, and there's always a transition period. Also, Tyrann Mathieu is replaced by Justin Reed at safety. Mathieu, to me, has always been, or at least in the past couple of years, really up and down. But the ups are pretty good. And, how they move on from him, just not only playing, but as a leader as well. He was kind of a catalyst for that defense. That's going to be interesting. I think Juan Thornhill is a pretty good safety too, so he might have to step up a little bit in terms of being a leader.
Offensive line, they did a lot of work last year in replacing the offensive line. They brought in Orlando Brown Jr. in a trade, drafted Trey Smith, who, he was in there doing his thing, Joe Tooney. So, I mean, they really did some work last year to really try and solidify things here, and it paid off for them.
Yeah, it's definitely if not the best offensive line in the league, it's one of the best. I was kind of skeptical at first with how Orlando Brown was going to transition out of Baltimore's offense at left tackle. He still may not be like one of the 5 best at his position, but he's proven worthy of being like a high tier starter at this point. Joe Thuney is arguably the best left guard in the NFL. Bengals fans knew this when they were trying to campaign to get him signed. Creed Humphrey was arguably the best center in the NFL as a rookie who fell all the way to like the 61st overall pick last year. Mm-hmm. Who's the right guard? Who's his first name? Trey Smith, the guy out of Tennessee who had medical issues. He fell all the way to the 6th round of the draft, but he was always good at Tennessee. He was a 5-star recruit. Bengals probably should have picked him up late in that draft, but he ended up being a pretty good starter for them as a rookie. And then they had Lucas Niang, who is just he's a solid right tackle, but that's 5 quality starters with a quarterback that likes to do a lot of things in the pocket, but he has all the time in the world now to do it.
And then you look at the running backs, speed and versatility. You got Edwards-Helaire, you got Rojo, and you've got Jerick McKinnon, guys who can catch, guys who got some long speed. So those pose as a threat there. And especially as plays break down, Mahomes extends, those running backs coming out of the flat or doing little short dump off routes, Mahomes will hit them and they can turn a short gain into a long gain pretty quickly here. So they're hoping that continues there. And then, of course, we can look down to kind of the wide receivers and tight ends. Jordan Franks, by the way, former Bengal. You got Kelsey here. And then, here are the names that we're looking at without Tyreek Hill. And it's just, they grabbed Sky Moore in the draft. I mean, you can look at, Cornell Powell, a guy last year. They brought in Juju. You mentioned Marquez Valdez-Scantling, and then you've got, Corey Coleman, right? That's a surprise. Josh Gordon, of course, Mecole Hardman is a threat with his speed and whatnot, but there's still a lot of talent here. There's still a lot of speed here, but it's just not the same without Tyreek Hill in this position group.
Yeah, they're going to probably ask a lot out of Sky Moore, who I believe is doing pretty well in training camp so far. But again, it's training camp. But they might ask him to be that 3rd receiver when they go into 3 receiver sets to replace, in part, of Tyreek Hill and the way that he was vertical in the offense. Like Juju at this point, that's an interesting pairing because I don't know, man. Like I don't think Juju was a bad player for Pittsburgh when Ben was like a competent quarterback. Like he had a pretty good first year, maybe first 2 years for being like 20, 21 years old. But with Mahomes, like, I feel like not every receiver works well with a quarterback like that. There might be some timing issues, but I still think that Juju is young enough to make something like amazing, or not amazing, but like something more out of his career. I'm just curious how that fits with Kansas City, but we know the opportunity is going to be there because, like you said, there's just a lot of targets open for grabs.
This seems to be a team that will probably, if everything goes well with the Bengals, once again, these two teams probably the game they play at the end of the year, and will probably be an important one again, and maybe they face off again in the postseason should everything go well for both of these teams. Who they have at quarterback, who they have at head coach, and some supplemental talent around the roster. You got to figure that both of these teams will be in it down the road for sure.
It's just going to be harder, I guess, for the Chiefs to get out of that division that I think they've won like 10 times in the last 10 years or something ridiculous. They've had a monopoly on the AFC West, and the AFC West in its entirety went all out to just stop this dynasty that they're building. The Chargers went all out. The Raiders, they brought in Devontae Adams. The Broncos brought in Russell Wilson. So I think with the Chiefs, like their potential outcomes of where they finish in the division has never been as greater ever since they got Patrick Mahomes. They're no longer like the undisputed king in that division, but Mahomes is still Mahomes, and he can still win you 12 games with his eyes closed.
Well, that's kind of going through the rest of the Bengals schedule as we get to preseason and all kinds of different things. So hopefully you kind of enjoyed our rundown of things and get you caught up on where the current status of some of these rosters are. Obviously some new players on all of these. So hopefully you enjoyed that. We've got a lot of different things coming up on this program, some more special guests coming down the road. We've had a couple of special ones over the past couple of weeks, which has been awesome. So we'll get you more information on that as we keep booking some of these cool special guests here. But that is going to start to wrap it up for us. John, you have a remember when for us as we start to get on out of here.
Just a quick remember when. I know the NFL went crazy over the Chiefs. Speaking of the Chiefs Rams game a few years ago when they scored a combined 105 points on a Monday night showdown. That still was 1 point shy of the largest or highest scoring combined game in NFL AFL merger history. And that is the 2004 meeting between the Browns and the Bengals. And this is one of my earliest memories watching the Bengals. This was, I believe, late in 2004. I remember this just because the Bengals wore like the orange jerseys with the black pants, or maybe the first time since when they debuted the uniforms that season. And I always associate those uniforms, like specifically the older Reebok versions, to this game because of how wacky it was. And I rewatched it really quick before we started the show, and it kind of mirrored the most recent Bengals Browns game in Cincinnati, because there was an early interception by Cleveland in that game, and it led to an early score, an early lead for Cleveland. And then the Bengals responded really quickly with a touchdown of their own. They had Chad Johnson with a 50-yard bomb from Carson Palmer, and it was just the floodgates kind of opened from there. You had 56 points from the Bengals, 46 from the Browns, just a ton of twists and turns. You had phenomenal games from both TJ Hushmanzada, who had this amazing high pointing of a long touchdown grab. Rudy Johnson had a solid game on the ground. Of course, like, guys are going to have great games. They scored 56 freaking points, but just the twists and turns, the turnovers. Carson Palmer threw 3 interceptions, and maybe only one of them was really his fault. It was the worst drop I've ever seen from Chad Johnson that led to that 3rd interception that kept the Browns in the game in the 4th quarter. But of course, as we all know, that game ended with Delta O'Neal and his pick 6 and the final 2 minutes of that game. But still, one of the most wild games that really no one really talks about in the annals of recent NFL history. But no game has produced more points since 1970 than that one, and I believe it deserves its own remember when.
There's nothing funnier than two teams that really couldn't stop each other on offense, and then the game being decided by a pick 6. I mean, there's really nothing funnier about that. And that was Delta's first year with the Bengals. They had made that trade, and they had Torrey James the year prior, who was a nice free agent pickup. And then between those two guys, they were just kind of interception machines for a couple of years there for the Bengals, along with many others. So, I mean, he was a good pickup. And both those guys, again, part of that very opportunistic 2005 defense that we talked about with David Pollack last week. And so that was a really, really crazy game. And that was, again, 2004, the first year that Carson Palmer ended up starting for the Cincinnati Bengals. And you're kind of like, wow, I mean, they're just putting up, 58 points or something? Mm-hmm. And granted, one was a pick 6, but I mean, that you're going, wow, this new quarterback is capable of getting this team in the 50-point range against a division rival. This is crazy.
Absolutely, man. I believe that was week 12, I want to say. And then the Bengals finished 8-8 that season. But you're right, man. Like Palmer, even looking back at those highlights, like he could move. Like he wasn't as stiff or as like much of a pocket passer, like a true pocket quarterback as maybe the reputation kind of has ended up for him. He could kind of scoot and get out of the pocket a little bit, but like that arm talent was undeniable. And like he was a number 1 overall pick for a reason. And he really took advantage of the weapons that the Bengals had and have always had at receiver. And you really did feel like that was the start of like, hey, maybe they're building something. They're not quite there yet because they still have some rough edges around the defense, but it was definitely one of those signs. There's like, maybe things are kind of turning around a little bit.
Yeah. Well, that was a good one. Remember when in 2004, that shootout with the Cleveland Browns, that of course was decided by a pick 6. Good one there, John. Let's drop the mic and get out of here. All I have to say is for a very long time in Southern California, there's been kind of a constant voice in sports, and one that I don't think a lot of people I think a lot of people appreciated, but I know for a while, when I would listen to this sportscaster, I would kind of go, man, this guy's a little bit all over the place when I would watch the games in which he would announce. And little did I kind of realize later on, especially as we started kind of doing a little bit more of this stuff with the podcast and whatnot, there was an element of storytelling that not a lot of announcers utilized in their broadcasts. And as you got older and you kind of listened more and you tuned in, especially the sport that he primarily broadcasted, which was baseball, tended to be a slow moving sport. And so keeping the attention of folks on TV and radio was an art. And Vin Scully was Van Gogh at his artistry. And, he lived a long life, a very eventful life, and a very well-respected life. And he lived all the way to the ripe age of 94. But still a sad day, I think, in the sports community and really in a lot of different communities, because he was known as really, truly a very nice guy. Hard to, I don't mean to be crass, but hard to say gone too soon at 94, but at the same time, still a big loss. And, out here in Southern California, really, I listened to a little bit of sports talk radio today. And, obviously that's all everybody is talking about, and rightfully so. Just a giant in the media and a giant in the sports world. And, just a voice that'll live on for a really, really, really long time. So R.I.P. Vin Scully.
Yeah. I didn't grow up like knowing who he was that well, or like waiting to listen to him call games. But upon his death and seeing all the highlights of his career, I didn't realize that he transcended just baseball and just in his work. I didn't know he called iconic Masters moments. I had no idea he called the catch with the 49ers and Cowboys. He obviously the Kirk Gibson homer in I believe the 86 or 88 World Series. Yeah, so his just overall span of moments and games that he's been a part of and made special. I believe it was the only no-hitter perfect game in World Series history 50 years ago. This guy was 25 years old in 1950. He was calling games when the Dodgers played in Brooklyn, and then all the way up until 2016. So just seeing all that stuff last night, all the things that I never really knew about. I knew who he was, obviously, because he was such an icon, but I didn't really understand the full scope of the impact that he had in just all the areas of sports that he transcended. So it was awesome learning about that. It's a shame that it happened after he died, but he obviously had such an incredible impact on anyone, even beyond just the Los Angeles and Brooklyn community.
100%. What you got for us, John?
Nothing much. Just another reminder that we're doing this fundraiser with the Pollack Family Foundation. We're going to keep that going for the foreseeable future. We're trying to get them as close to their goal as possible. But once again, I want to reiterate: a phenomenal foundation, phenomenal purpose, phenomenal opportunities, and we would greatly appreciate any and all support that you could give us. And again, if you haven't already listened to our interview with David Pollack, he breaks down his time with the Bengals, his post-playing career, his doubts about entering the broadcasting industry and how he's flourished in that. And he also goes in depth with what the Pollack Family Foundation does for the Atlanta community and everything that goes into that. So check it out. If you haven't already, we would greatly appreciate any support that you could give us.
Absolutely. Have a great week, everybody. We'll be back. We'll try and be back Friday for some listener questions live if my guy John is up for it. And it's been a little while since we've done that. So we'll try and do that. And then we'll be getting you more and more content, more guests, all kinds of different stuff as training camp and preseason rolls around. Thanks for tuning in, John. Have a great week, my friend. Take care.
I'll talk to you soon, man.